Hey, everybody, welcome to the Aligned Love Podcast. This is the place where I am going to help you find the one thing that you feel is missing: healthy love. I am your host, Lauren Zoller, and in this podcast, I will share with you how to attract love, live in alignment, and elevate your deepest relationships. So, buckle up, get present, tune into your body, and open up to the possibility that you truly do get to have it all. Let's dive in.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the next season of the Aligned Love Podcast. I am so excited to be here with all of you, and we have a very powerful season set up for the next couple of months, and I cannot wait to introduce you to some of the special guests that I have lined up, and also some of the powerful solo episodes that I'm going to use to pour in to all of you. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how to live on your own timeline. And I want to talk a lot about the timeline that I have been living on over the past year. And I want to reflect on how much has shifted and changed since last season. If you followed me last season, you know that I was living in Denver, Colorado. I was, for most of the season, in a relationship with someone that lived in Denver, Colorado. And I'm now living in Lynchburg, Tennessee, which is about an hour and 15 minutes outside of Nashville, on a property that has an old bed and breakfast on it, in a home that's over 150 years old, with chickens and a Great Dane puppy and a barn cat. Lenny is here with me, and I am dating an incredible man who has two beautiful little girls. I have an entirely different life. And what I really want to talk about today is how you can choose and shift into this concept of alignment over timelines, and how you can drop societal expectations of where you should be at a certain age, and how following societal timelines and following these timelines that you think you need to be on can actually lead you down a path where you wake up one day and you realize, this is not actually what I want. Like, if I get really honest in my core and in my soul, this is not where I'm supposed to be. And so building a life that feels just as good as it looks is so important and so vital. And I believe that there are so many of us, myself included, who have grown up with this fairy tale concept that we are supposed to get married in our 20s and travel with our significant other, build these incredible careers. And then when everything falls in line at the perfect place, we'll have kids in our 30s and everything will be fantastic and the kids will grow up. And we have this idea of what our timeline is supposed to look like, because for many of us, that is what we witnessed in our family of origin. Right. And for many of us, that may not be the experience, but it is something that we witnessed in other people's family of origin. Or gosh, if you grew up like I did, watching Full House and Saved by the Bell and all of these shows that really preached what a family is supposed to look like, quote unquote, supposed to look like, you think that you are supposed to live on that same timeline. And I felt that timeline so deeply in my 20s, and yet I still oriented to a completely different timeline. It was like I always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to get married young and I wanted to have babies in my 30s, but the universe just didn't work out that way. And as I was taking time to reflect on what I wanted to speak about in this podcast, I sat down to look at the timeline that I did follow and how it did not line up at all with what society thought I should do, or what really I thought I should be doing at that time. And the reason that I want to talk about it today is because if I would have had this podcast and if I would have had someone tell me, hey, timelines, like the timeline that you think you need to follow, the timeline that society has put on you, the timeline that you have put on yourself, if I would have been able to release that timelines don't actually matter, they truly don't matter. What matters is alignment. If I would have had somebody tell me that, I think that the process and the journey through what I went through in my 20s and my 30s would have been way more enjoyable and would have come with less resistance. So, to give you a quick background, in my 20s, I actually moved to Nashville, Tennessee 13 years ago after graduating with a vocal degree from Bellarmine University in Kentucky because I had a management deal in Tennessee. So music is originally what brought me to Nashville. And I had a blues band here. I was also a lead at a rock opera that was based out of Detroit. So for the beginning part of my 20s, I was touring and I was singing and I was performing. And most of the people in my life that I went to high school with and that I went to college with were graduating from college and they were starting to settle down with their significant others and they were starting to think about getting married and starting a life with someone. And while I deeply desired that in my heart, I also really wanted to be performing and I wanted to be touring and I wanted to be doing something that wasn't necessarily getting married right away after college. And I remember having so much shame about that, feeling like, oh my gosh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I should be going to get a 9 to 5 and I should be settling down with someone. And it just wasn't the case, right? I toured for a while. My management deal fell through. I ended up leaving the music industry and had a couple of years trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I joined the corporate world and I did sales for a company called Nielsen for a little while. Absolutely hated it. Left after about 7 months. Then I started managing a yoga studio, got into yoga, decided to open a yoga studio in Nashville with a partner. I co-owned a yoga studio and I toured for a little while teaching that methodology. And then about 8.5 years ago, I decided to start my own business. And I did it alongside teaching yoga while all of my friends were getting married. Like at this point, I was dating during this time, but I really wasn't meeting anyone that I was wanting to build a life with. And so I decided to teach yoga while opening my business. And I really started to shift the focus from being in partnership with someone and building a life to, okay, well, I'm going to build this business because this business is something that feels steady and feels really deeply aligned with who I am. And so the reason that I'm saying all of this is because I think that there are so many people who listen to this podcast who shame themselves and who get down on themselves for where they are in life. And I'm a 36-year-old woman who just found the partnership that she's been looking for her whole life. And I'm also getting ready to freeze my eggs. And I stepped into a situation. I've always wanted family, but I've stepped into a situation with a man who has 2 beautiful children. And it doesn't look like any timeline that has been presented to me prior to my own timeline. Like if you would have asked me in my 20s, I would have kept telling you, yeah, well, I'm doing this, but I'm also dating. I'm going to get married and I'm still going to have my career alongside getting married and I'm going to have babies in my early 30s. And something happened when, over the past couple of years, probably the past 2 years, that really woke me up to the whole concept that timelines are bullshit. And what really matters is alignment. In this whole process, as I built my business, I also met someone that checkmarked all the boxes for me. And I moved to Denver, Colorado, because I thought, okay, this is the way that my timeline is supposed to work out. I toured in my 20s. I built my business in my early 30s. I met this man at 34. I'm going to move there. We're going to get married. We're going to have babies. He check marks all the boxes. And then a year into that relationship, I woke up and I realized, wow, this doesn't actually feel the way that I thought it would feel. And I remember having a moment, and if you've heard me, if you've ever come to any of my master classes or you've come to see me speak, I talk about this moment, pretty vividly. I remember having a moment when I was living in Denver where I was sitting in my morning meditation and I woke up or I came out of that meditation and I realized that the life that I was living, which is this life that I thought on paper I wanted, wasn't actually in my core and in my soul what I deeply desired. And I think that so many women wake up to that. Some women wake up, in their early 30s to that. Some women may wake up in their 20s. Some women may wake up in their 40s. Maybe you've been in a relationship for a while and it's really scary to recognize that. Maybe you have been married for a while and it's really scary to recognize that. Maybe you are single and you're not in a relationship and you're in your 50s and you recognize that, but you have this moment where you realize like, whoa, this life I'm living in isn't it? Like it's not in my core. It's not what I desire. It doesn't feel aligned. And the hard part for me in that moment was that, I was on a timeline. I remember recognizing that, and the thoughts that came to me were, yeah, Lauren, but you're 35 years old and you want children. Your timeline for children is collapsing. And you want marriage. And you have found this man that check marks all the boxes. Like he's a wonderful man. And in that moment, I also had done enough work on myself. I had done enough work to know my nervous system and know safety and know how to connect to my soul that I couldn't shut it down. And after I sat with this visualization for a while of recognizing the life that I was in wasn't actually the life that my soul desired, I remember sitting and dedicating to that visualization practice. A couple of weeks later, I woke up and said, I have to shift. Like this identity of what my soul desires is so strong. And what I desire is so strong that I'm going to have to shift identities. I'm going to have to implode what I thought on paper I wanted. And that's really hard. It was really hard for me. Not just because I had moved across the country for love and taken a huge risk and, was close to marriage and babies and all these things. The hardest part was, okay, but if I let this go, and I know many women are going to resonate when I say this, what if the thing I desire doesn't make its way in? And then I had a moment, but wait, this is what I teach every single woman inside of my programs. When you hold on to something that is not what you truly desire, it is going to block you from the thing that you actually deeply desire. And because that is something that I preach, and I sincerely, I am someone who practices what she preaches. And because that is something that I so deeply preach inside of my containers, I had to practice it. And I knew in that moment, something has to shift. And so I started to use my voice and I started to talk about how I was feeling. And the beautiful thing was he was feeling the same way once I was able to articulate that. Ladies, let's talk about something we don't hear enough about: options. For years, I thought that love, marriage, and babies had to happen on a set timeline. But here's the truth. Your timeline, it's yours to create. And that is why I have made the decision to freeze my eggs with Tennessee Fertility Institute, because having choices is power. Whether you're focusing on your career, waiting for the right partner, or simply want to give yourself peace of mind, fertility preservation lets you take control of your future on your terms. If you have ever wondered if egg freezing is right for you, this is your sign. Tennessee Fertility Institute makes the process simple, supportive, and designed for you. You can book your free consult today at tnfertility.com/contact-us. Again, that is tnfertility.com/contact-us, because your future deserves options. So that was a huge moment for me, which is what led me to then following my heart. And it was day by day for me. Okay, well, what does feel in alignment? Like at that point in time, my business wasn't doing great. I had a massive team. We were running a huge overhead, and things about the business didn't feel good. The relationship didn't feel great. My health didn't feel good. My health felt like it was declining. And so I started to make little steps, and I started to ask myself, well, what does feel good? It didn't feel good to live in Denver. So the first step that I knew I needed to make was, I want to go back home. I want to go back to Nashville. And for many of you who have been following me for a while, you know that I had in that visualization that I had in Denver, I had this vision, because my ex and I were talking about moving. I had this vision of this beautiful skyline with floor to ceiling windows. And I couldn't make sense of it, because nowhere that him and I were thinking about moving would that vision of a skyline been possible. And when I moved back to Nashville and I moved my stuff back across the country, I was apartment shopping, because I have 2 rentals in Nashville, but they were booked. I had just signed full year leases for both of my renters. And so I needed a place to live. And so I was looking for apartments, and the first apartment that I walked into was floor to ceiling windows with a beautiful view of downtown Nashville. And I realized in that moment, it was my nudge from the universe. Like, this whole implosion of your life at 35 years old. Like, I remember moving into my apartment a month after my 36th birthday and walking in, seeing the skyline with a completely empty apartment at 35 and sobbing. I'm like, here I am, wanting marriage, wanting children, and I'm empty. There's nothing here. But walking in and seeing that skyline was my nudge from the universe saying, hey, we've got you. Keep following this. Keep following this deep sense of alignment. And then things started to happen so quickly after that. Because so many things were out of alignment in my life, I ended up letting go of my entire team in my business, scaled everything back. I started to look at my health and what was happening. The move back to Nashville immediately started to change my health. My blood results started shifting. My hormones started balancing. My income in the business started to level back out. Things started to feel safe again. I started to understand in this process of following my heart and coming back to me that I didn't actually fall behind in this process. I didn't fall behind. I realigned with my truth. And I kept feeling that, and I kept orienting to that. And the more I felt it and the more I oriented to it, the things that I deeply desired started to make their way in, right? The apartment was the first thing that made its way in. The second thing was that things in my business started to realign. I launched my membership. Women started to flood into the collective, which is my signature program. I started to get interest for the book that I had been working on for a year. I was able to increase my revenue. The business just started to feel like it was realigning again. My health started to shift. And the most beautiful thing was 6 short months after moving back, may have been a couple months, maybe 7, 8 months, I ended up meeting an incredible man who is so deeply in alignment with what my soul desires. Like, truly deeply. It feels safe. It feels easy. Something we say to each other all the time is, wow, this feels so easy, right? And it came in a way, I wanted a family. I wanted deep partnership. It came in a way that didn't really make sense with the timeline. And so I tell that story because that's where we are now, right? I'm living in Lynchburg, Tennessee, most of the time, in a bed and breakfast with chickens, with a beautiful Great Dane, with a man who I absolutely adore, with his 2 little girls, and our barn cat that I manifested, and my cat Lenny. And we're talking about the future. And it's such a different feeling, and it's such a different life. And this is why timelines can be such a trap. And they can create this deep sense of pressure that you need to be in something and that you need to settle in something. When if you just learn to listen to your heart and your soul and you follow that, I am proof. I promise you that the life that you desire can be yours. But it can't be yours if you stay in something that isn't in alignment with what you deeply desire. And the more that you embrace your own unique path, in your own unique timeline, the more that you will wake up to a deeply authentic and aligned life. And that's where I am now. I'm actually going into the clinic later today to do my blood work, to freeze my eggs. So at the end of this month, which I'm going to be recording a podcast about that. I'm going to be interviewing the doctor that's doing my egg retrieval on the podcast this season. So you're going to be following along with my egg retrieval. I'm doing that because I'm not sticking to a timeline. Right? Nathan and I, who's my partner now, we want the space. We want the time to grow a relationship, to pour into the girls. And if I want to have children down the line, I want to be able to have that opportunity, but I don't want it to be the entire reason that we're in partnership together. I don't want that timeline hanging over my head. I want choices. I want options. I want to be able to build the deep, loving, committed, conscious partnership that I've always desired. And a family that is here in a way that I'll always desired. Right? So part of this has been able to happen because of my deep connection to my nervous system. If you know me, I always say that if you do not have what you desire, if dating feels hard for you, if relationships feel hard for you, it's because your nervous system has been conditioned to choose familiarity and survival over connection and safety. And if I didn't know the language of my nervous system, chances are I would probably still be living in Denver, Colorado, in a relationship that didn't feel aligned. Because my survival mechanism would have kicked in saying, yeah, but if you leave, then you may not get the things that you desire. Right? So understanding safety and knowing safety and really, really being a person who, again, practices what she preaches and knows safety. Like I know how to access safety. I know when I'm not in safety because I'm able to attune to that and I'm able to orient to that. It helped me feel safe in my own personal timeline. It helped me feel safe enough to exit something that didn't feel as though it was deeply in alignment with who I was, right? Because when you're open to the unexpected, and when you're open to the unexpected from the space of safety, because there is a reality that does exist, where you can be open to what's not here yet and feel safe in the unexpected. It is in this gap that deep love, wild success, insane happiness can make their way in, because those things don't operate on a fixed schedule and timeline. Love, success, happiness, they don't know a timeline, you guys. They don't know a timeline. They know alignment. And when you are aligned, those things can make their way in. Okay. So I just want you to take some time as we close out this podcast interview today to just, as you're listening, take a moment to reflect on where you have been following a timeline that's not yours. Where are you discounting your own sense of alignment to stay in something that you think you need to be in? Maybe it's a career. Maybe it's a friendship. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a place you're living right now that doesn't feel aligned. And I want to encourage you to start to soften into this sense of alignment over urgency. When we look at the definition of trauma, it is anything that is too fast, too much, too soon. It literally is the definition of urgency. And when we live in the space of settling into a timeline because we think we need to be there, we're letting our trauma take the driver's seat. If you're interested in doing this deep work to come back home to yourself, and to really know safety in your nervous system, and to be able to feel safe with throwing your timeline out the window and actually living an aligned life, then this is when you come into my programs and you do the deep work. My program, The Collective, is now open. We're enrolling right now. So you can always shoot me a message on Instagram at Lauren Zoller, and we can talk more about what that process looks like. But this is your nudge to truly understand that love is not passing you by. Success is not passing you by. Fulfillment and happiness are not passing you by. They are simply waiting to meet you at your place of alignment. And what I want you to understand is that this season on the Align Love podcast, my number one intention for you is to teach you how to stop waiting, stop settling, and to actually start aligning and living. Because that is the life that is meant for you. When you truly listen and you get quiet enough to know safety and listen to the subtle nudges. So there's so many exciting things coming this season. I've got incredible interviews. I've got incredible solo episodes. I'm going to be giving you transformational tools that you can use so that you can start to shift how you relate to your timeline and align and with love and the success and the life that you desire in a really deep way. So thank you so much for listening. Make sure that you share this episode with anyone that you think needs to hear it. And I will see you on the next episode of the Align Love podcast. I love you. See you soon.
Today's episode of the Aligned Love podcast. One thing that would really help me and the other new potential listeners is for you to rate this show and leave a comment wherever you tune in and listen. Also, make sure to link up with me on Instagram at Lauren Zoller, and please share this podcast with anyone who you think may enjoy it. Until next episode, remember, every transformation begins with one moment of awareness, and I hope today has been yours. I'll see you next time.